Hey guys, it's ZLR here, and today I'm going to be doing my Week 9 recap of the NFL season. And the first game we have here is the Texans and the Jets, with the Jets winning at 21 to 13. We had CJ Stroud with 11 completions out of 30 attempts for 191 yards, and Joe Mixon attempted a pass but didn't get anything out of it. Joe Mixon also had 24 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. CJ Stroud had 8 carries, 59 yards. JJ Taylor had 3 carries for 23 yards. And Dare Ungambale had 1 carry for -1 yard. Tank Dell had 6 receptions for 126 yards. Robert Woods had 2 receptions for 24 yards. And Dalton Schultz had 3 receptions for 21 yards. And that was legit it for the wide receivers. For the Jets side of things, we had Aaron Rodgers, 22 completions out of 32 attempts, 211 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Brees Hall had 15 carries, 74 yards. Uh, Malachi Corley, I feel so bad for him. He had to do that drop like how Deshaun Jackson did it, and that's gonna haunt him forever. 1 carry, 18 yards. Braylon Allen had 4 carries for 9 yards, and Aaron Rodgers carried the ball once but didn't get anything out of it. Devontae Adams had some receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson had 9 receptions, 90 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And man, he had a fucking crazy catch. I won't talk about too much about it because I have a video about it already. But we also had Kenny Yeboah, I think. 1 reception, 12 yards. Brees Hall had 2 receptions for 11 yards. Mike Williams had 1 reception for 6 yards. Uh, Jeremy Ruckert had 1 reception for 4 yards. And Tyler Conklin had 1 reception but got -3 yards because of that. Then we had the Saints and the Panthers, with the Panthers winning at 23 to 22. We had Derek Carr, 18 completions out of 31 attempts, 236 yards and a touchdown. Taysom Hill attempted a pass. Alvin Kamara had 29 carries, 155 yards. Taysom Hill had 5 carries for 19 yards and a touchdown. We had Jordan Mims with 5 carries, 13 yards. We had Matthew Hayball with 1 carry for 11 yards, and Jermaine Jackson with 1 carry for -1 yard. Okay, that's a lot of receivers. Alvin Kamara, 6 receptions, 60 yards. Taysom Hill, 4 receptions, 41 yards. We had Jawan Johnson with 2 receptions for 41 yards. Cedric Wilson Jr. with 2 receptions for 34 yards. We had Jordan Mims with 1 reception for 25 yards. Foster Moranu. I don't know why I said Frank. Um, 1 reception, 17 yards and a touchdown. Chris Olave with 1 reception for 13 yards. I hope he is all right. And Marcus Valdez Scantling with 1 reception for 5 yards. And for the Panthers side of things, we have Bryce Young, 16 completions out of 26 attempts, 171 yards, a touchdown, and a interception. Chuba Hubbard had 15 carries, 72 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Bryce Young had 4 carries, 9 yards. Xavier Leggett had 1 carry for 6 yards. We had Devin Tompkins with 1 carry for -2 yards, and Miles Sanders with 2 carries for -5 yards. We also had Jatavion Sanders with 4 receptions, 87 yards. We had Jalen Coker with 2 receptions for 36 yards. Xavier Leggett with 4 receptions, 33 yards and a touchdown. David Moore. Damn it. I'm having a bad time with names today, I guess. 2 receptions for 20 yards. Chuba Hubbard had 2 receptions, nothing out of it. And Miles Sanders had 2 receptions, -5 yards because of it. Then I saw that Jonathan Mingo got traded to the Cowboys. Yeah, that literally just happened as I was about to make this clip. So, yeah, why not put that first? But anyway, we had the Commanders and the Giants, with the Commanders winning 27-22. Jaden Daniels had 15 completions out of 22 attempts, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Chris Rodriguez Jr. That's a new name I haven't seen yet. 11 carries, 52 yards. Austin Eckler had 11 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels had 8 carries for 35 yards. And Jeremy McNichols had 8 carries for 20 yards. We had Noah Brown with 5 receptions, 60 yards. We had Omalad Zacchaeus with 2 receptions for 48 yards. We had Austin Eckler with 3 receptions for 41 yards. We had, who is this one? My phone's acting a little bit slow. Dimey Brown, 1 reception for 24 yards. Scary Terry didn't do much this game. That's surprising. Um, 2 receptions, 19 yards, but he did get 2 touchdowns. I still respect that. Uh, then we got Ben Sinnott. Sinnott. I don't know why I said Sinnott the first time. 1 reception for 12 yards, and Zach Ertz with 1 reception for 5 yards. Then we had the Giants. Daniel Jones, 20 completions out of 26 attempts, 174 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Tyrone Tracy Jr. with 16 carries, 66 yards. Daniel Jones with 7 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Devin Singletary with seven carries for 33 yards. And Darius Slayton with 1 carry for 11 yards. Malik Neighbors, 9 receptions, 59 yards. Theo Johnson with 3 receptions, 51 yards, and a touchdown. Darius Slayton with 3 receptions, 49 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson with 3 receptions for 10 yards. Tyrone Tracy Jr. had 1 reception for 3 yards. And Chris Manhertz had 1 reception for 2 yards and a touchdown. Then we had the Bills and the Dolphins, with the Bills winning it 30-27. We had Tua Tagovailoa, 25 completions out of 28 attempts, 231 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Devon Achane had 12 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Raheem Mostert had 10 carries for 56 yards. We had Jalen Wright with 6 carries for 18 yards. Malik Washington with 1 carry for 9 yards. And Tua Tagovailoa with 2 carries for 3 yards. We had Tyreek Hill with 4 receptions, 80 yards. Devon Achane with 8 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. We had Jonnu Smith with 5 carries for 5 receptions for 46 yards. Raheem Mostert had 2 receptions for 32 yards. Odell Beckham had 3 receptions for 15 yards. We had Durham Smith with 1 reception for 4 yards. And Jalen Waddle had 2 receptions, -4 yards, and a touchdown. That is the weirdest. That is the weirdest stat I have ever heard in my life. But I guess that works. Then we had Josh Allen, 25 completions, 39 attempts, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a interception. We had James Cook with 10 carries for 44 yards. We had Ty Johnson with 3 carries for 23 yards. We had Ray Davis with 4 carries for 20 yards. Nice there. And Josh Allen had 2 carries for 7 yards. We have Ray Davis with 2 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Khalil Shakir with 6 receptions for 50 yards. Dalton Kincaid with 4 receptions, 32 yards. We had Mac Hollins with 5 receptions, 30 yards, and a touchdown. James Cook had 5 receptions for 25 yards. Keon Coleman had 1 reception for 21 yards. Dawson Knox had 1 reception for 5 yards. We had Quinton Morris with 1 reception, 2 yards, and a touchdown. Then we had the Chargers and the Browns, with the Chargers winning it 27-10. We had Justin Herbert, 18 completions out of 27 attempts for 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. We had J.K. Dobbins with 14 carries, 85 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Kamani Vidal with 5 carries for 7 yards. Justin Herbert with 3 carries for 2 yards. And Quentin Johnston with 1 carry for 2 yards. Quentin Johnston also had 4 receptions, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Ladd McConkey had 5 receptions for 64 yards. We had Joshua Palmer with 2 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. J.K. Dobbins had 2 receptions for 20 yards. Will Dissly had 2 receptions for 9 yards. We had Hayden Hurst with 1 reception for 6 yards. Eric Tomlinson with 1 reception for 2 yards. Jalen Rager had 1 reception but didn't get anything out of it. Then we had the Browns. Jameis Winston, 26 completions out of 46 attempts, 235 yards, touchdown, 3 interceptions. There's the Jameis I was looking for. I knew that win that they got was a fluke. Nick Chubb, 15 carries for 39 yards. Jameis Winston had 5 carries for 27 yards. Pierre Strong Jr. had 2 carries for 8 yards. And we had Jerome Ford with 2 carries for 5 yards. Cedric Tillman, 6 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown. We had Jerry Jeudy with 7 receptions, 73 yards. Jordan Atkins with 3 receptions for 32 yards. David Njoku with 5 receptions for 29 yards. We had Elijah Moore with 3 receptions for 28 yards. Jerome Ford with 1 reception for 2 yards. And Nick Chubb had a reception but got negative 4 yards because of it. Then we had the game I didn't want to talk about. Titans and the Patriots. Titans win 20-17 in overtime. The first out of 3 overtime games, I should say. We had Drake May complete 29 passes out of 41 attempts, 206 yards, touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And that second interception was to seal the game for the Titans after they got a field goal. Definitely a rookie mistake by Drake May, but I can't really hold him accountable. Well, I can hold him accountable for it, but it's a rookie mistake. There's going to be rookies that do that all the time. So I really do not blame him for really chucking it down the field to try to get a touchdown. But Kendrick, whoever was going to try to catch the ball, I think it was either Kendrick Bourne or something. He could have at least tried a little more to try to get it. I mean, even though he was in double coverage, he could have at least tried a little bit. Then we also had Drake May, 8 carries, 95 yards. Dude has some legs. Dude has some legs, though. I can say that. Ramondre Stevenson, 10 carries, 16 yards, and a touchdown. Really bad game from him. Jermichael Hasty had 1 carry but didn't get anything out of it. And Antonio Gibson had 1 carry, negative 1 yard. We also had Hunter Henry, 7 receptions, 56 yards. Kendrick Bourne had 4 receptions, 41 yards. Ramondre Stevenson had 5 receptions, 38 yards, and a touchdown. So that's where my points came from in fantasy. Demario Douglas had 7 receptions, 35 yards. Kayshon Boutte had 2 receptions for 18 yards. Antonio Gibson had 1 reception for 12 yards. Austin Hooper had 1 reception for 8 yards. Jaheim Bell had a reception for 1 yard. Jalen Polk didn't get anything. And JaMycal Hasty had 1 reception, -3 yards. And the Titans, Mason Rudolph had 20 completions out of 33 attempts, 240 yards, a touchdown, and a interception. Tony Pollard had 28 carries, 128 yards. That is another reason I got a lot of points on fantasy. We had Julius Chestnut, still one of the funniest names, I feel like. 5 carries for 22 yards. Mason Rudolph had 4 carries for 19 yards. Tyler Boyd had 1 carry for 3 yards. And Jaquan Jackson had 1 carry but got -5 yards from that. Calvin Ridley had 5 receptions for 73 yards. We had Nick Westbrook with 5 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown. Chig Okonkwo, one of my favorite receivers to say his name. Actually, I think tight end. 3 receptions for 38 yards. Let me make sure I said it. Yeah, tight end. Then we had Nick Vannett with 2 receptions, 33 yards, and a touchdown. Tony Pollard with 3 receptions for 26 yards. We had Josh Weil with 1 reception for 12 yards. And we also had Jaquan Jackson with 1 reception for 8 yards. Then we had the Falcons and the Cowboys, with the Falcons winning at 27-21. We had Dak Prescott complete 18 passes out of 24 attempts, 133 yards, and a touchdown. We also had Cooper Rush with 13 completions out of 25 attempts, 115 yards, and a touchdown. And we also had Brian Anger with just 1 attempt. 50 total attempts in passing for the Cowboys. That's pretty crazy. We had Rico Dowdle with 12 carries, 75 yards. Dak Prescott with 3 carries for 30 yards. CeeDee Lamb had 2 carries for 15 yards. Dalvin Cook had 2 carries for 8 yards. We had Hunter Luepke with 1 carry for 5 yards, and Cooper Rush with 1 carry for 4 yards. Then we had Jake Ferguson with 7 receptions, 71 yards. CeeDee Lamb with 8 receptions for 47 yards. We had KaVontae Turpin with 3 receptions for 36 yards. Rico Dowdle with 5 receptions, 32 yards, and a touchdown. We had Jalen Brooks with 2 receptions, 26 yards. We had Jalen Tolbert with 3 receptions, 19 yards, and a touchdown. Ryan Flournoy, Flournoy, I don't know, with 1 reception for 13 yards, and Hunter Luepke with 2 receptions for 4 yards. And for the Falcons side of things, we had old Kirko Chains completing 19 passes out of 24 attempts, 222 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We had Bijan Robinson with 19 carries, 86 yards. We had Tyler Algier with 6 carries, 18 yards, and a touchdown. We had Ray McCloud with 1 carry for 7 yards. And Kirk Cousins carried the ball 4 times but got -11 yards from it. We had Darnell Mooney with 5 receptions, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Bijan Robinson had 7 receptions for 59 yards. Ray McCloud had 3 receptions, 28 yards, and a touchdown. Drake London had 2 receptions, 27 yards, and a touchdown. Kyle Pitts had 1 reception for 11 yards. And we had KhaDarel Hodge with 1 reception for 9 yards. Then we had the Raiders and the Bengals, with the Bengals win at 41-24. We had Desmond Ridder with 11 completions out of 16 attempts, 74 yards and a touchdown. And then Gardner Minshew, Minshew Mania, had 10 completions out of 17 attempts for 124 yards. We had Alexander Madison with 9 carries, 36 yards. Amir Abdullah with 4 carries, 12 yards. Zamir White with 6 carries, 10 yards, and a touchdown. Desmond Ridder with 1 carry for 2 yards. And Gardner Minshew had a carry but didn't get anything out of it. Then we had Jacoby Myers with 8 receptions, 105 yards. Brock Bowers had 5 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown. We had Harrison Bryant with 2 receptions for 22 yards. Amir Abdullah had 3 receptions for 14 yards. We had Ramel Keaton with 1 reception for 7 yards. And we had Trey Tucker with 2 receptions for 5 yards. And for the Bengals side of things, we had Joe Burrow with 27 completions out of 39 attempts, 251 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 8 interception. We had Chase Brown with 27 carries, 120 yards. Joe Burrow had 3 carries for 11 yards. And we had Jake Browning with 1 carry for a -1 yard. Mike Gesicki with 5 receptions, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jamar Chase with 7 receptions for 43 yards. Chase Brown with 5 receptions, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Eric All Jr. with 2 receptions for 24 yards. I hope he's all right because I heard he's going to be out for the rest of the season. We had Drew Sample with 4 receptions, 14 yards, and a touchdown. We had Tanner Hudson with 2 receptions, 14 yards. And we also had Andre Losevis with 1 reception, 10 yards, and a touchdown. And last but not least, we had Kendrick Poyer with 1 reception for 9 yards. Then we had the Broncos and the Ravens, with the Ravens win at 41-10. We have Bo Nix complete 19 passes out of 33 attempts, 223 yards, and a interception. Cortland Sutton had 1 completion out of 1 attempt for 2 yards and a touchdown. We had Javonte Williams with 12 carries, 42 yards. Bo Nix with 6 carries for 36 yards. Audric Estime with 5 carries for 35 yards. Jaleel McLaughlin with 5 carries for 10 yards. And we had Michael Burton with 2 carries, -1 yard. We had Cortland Sutton with 7 receptions, 122 yards. We had Javonte Williams with 2 receptions for 42 yards. We had Troy Franklin with 1 reception, 19 yards. We had Devon Vele with 2 receptions for 11 yards, as well as LaJordan Humphrey, or as Brandon Perna calls him, Lil Hump. We had Jaleel McLaughlin with 3 receptions for 10 yards. We had Adam Trotman with 1 reception for 4 yards, as well as Marvin Mims. And Bo Nix had 1 reception for 2 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Ravens side of things, we had Lamar Jackson completing 16 passes out of 19 attempts, 280 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Derrick Henry had 23 carries, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Justice Hill had 5 carries for 15 yards. Lamar Jackson had 3 carries for 4 yards. And we had Josh Johnson with 3 carries for 2 yards. We had Zay Flowers with 5 receptions, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Justice Hill with 3 receptions, 43 yards. Nelson Aguilar with 1 reception, 29 yards. Derrick Henry had 1 reception for 27 yards. Mark Andrews had 2 receptions, 26 yards. Rashad Bateman had 3 receptions, 25 yards. And Patrick Richard had 1 reception, 3 yards, and a touchdown. Then we had the Cardinals and the Bears, with the Cardinals win at 29-9. We had Caleb Williams with 22 completions out of 41 attempts for 217 yards. we had DeAndre Swift with 16 carries, 51 yards. We had Rashawn Johnson with 3 carries, 13 yards, and Caleb Williams with 4 carries for 5 yards. Rome Odunze had 5 receptions, 104 yards. We had Keenan Allen with 4 receptions, 36 yards. DJ Moore had 4 receptions, 33 yards. DeAndre Swift had 6 receptions, 31 yards. We had Rashawn Johnson with 2 receptions, 8 yards, and Gerald Everett with 1 reception for 5 yards. And for the Cardinals side of things, we had Kyler Murray, 13 completions, 20 attempts, 154 yards. James Conner had 18 carries, 107 yards. Amari Demercado had 4 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown. We had Trey Benson with 8 carries, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Kyler Murray had 2 carries, 6 yards, and Trey McBride had 1 carry, 2 yards, and a touchdown. And we had DJ Dallas with 1 carry for 2 yards. Trey McBride also had 3 receptions, 35 yards. Elijah Higgins had 2 receptions for 34 yards, as well as Marvin Harrison Jr. Amari Demercado had 2 receptions for 21 yards. Trey Benson had 1 reception for 18 yards. And James Conner had 3 receptions for 12 yards. Then we had the Eagles and the Jaguars, with the Eagles winning at 28-23. We had Trevor Lawrence with 16 completions out of 31 attempts, 169 yards, and 2 interceptions. Then we had Travis Etienne with 3 carries for 24 yards. Tank Bigsby with 8 carries, 22 yards. Trevor Lawrence with 5 carries, 8 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And we had Ernest Johnson with 2 carries, 6 yards. Evan Ingram had 5 receptions, 45 yards. We had Parker Washington with 3 receptions, 41 yards. We had Austin Trammell with 2 receptions for 40 yards. Brian Thomas Jr. with 2 receptions, 22 yards. We had Tim Jones with 1 reception, 10 yards. Travis Etienne with 2 receptions for 6 yards. And Luke Farrell with 1 reception for 5 yards. For the Eagles side of things, we had Jalen Hurts, 18 completions out of 24 attempts, 230 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Saquon Barkley had 27 carries, 159 yards, and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts had 13 carries, 67 yards, and a touchdown. We had Kenneth Gainwell with 5 carries, 9 yards. And Ainias Smith, I think that is, with 1 carry for 2 yards. Then we had Devonta Smith with 4 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Saquon Barkley with 3 receptions, 40 yards, and a touchdown. We had A.J. Brown with 2 receptions, 36 yards. Jahan Dotson with 1 reception for 36 yards. We had Grant Calcaterra with 5 receptions, 30 yards. We had Kenneth Gainwell with 1 reception, 1 yard. And Ainias Smith and Ben Van Ben Van Summeren with only 1 reception, but nothing out of it. And that was for both of those players, which are Ainias Smith and Ben Van Summeren. So, yeah. And then we get to the second overtime game out of the 3 from this week, as we had the Rams and the Seahawks, with the Rams win at 26-20. We had Matthew Stafford complete 25 passes out of 44 attempts, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. We had Kyren Williams with 22 carries, 69 yards. Nice. We had Matthew Stafford with 1 carry, didn't get anything out of it. And Blake Corum had 1 carry and got -1 yard because of it. We had Cooper Kupp with 11 receptions, 104 yards. we had Demarcus Robinson, who had a very good game, 6 receptions, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Tyler Johnson with 3 receptions, 38 yards. We had Kyron Williams with 1 reception, 26 yards. Tutu Atwell had 1 reception for 16 yards. Puka Nacua had 1 reception and 11 yards. And he also got ejected. Davis Allen had 1 reception for 5 yards. And Hunter Long had 1 reception for 4 yards. For the Seahawks side of things, we had Geno Smith complete 21 passes out of 34 attempts, 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. We had Kenneth Walker with 25 carries, 83 yards. Geno Smith had 6 carries, 16 yards. And Zach Charbonnet had 2 carries for 8 yards. Jackson Smith had 7 receptions, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett had 3 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. We had Cody White with 2 receptions, 44 yards. AJ Barner with 4 receptions, 27 yards. Zach Charbonnet with 2 receptions, 25 yards. And Kenneth Walker with 3 receptions, 24 yards. Then we had the Lions and the Packers, with the Lions win at 24-14. We had Jared Goff complete 18 passes out of 22 attempts, 145 yards, and a touchdown. David Montgomery had 17 carries, 73 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 11 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown. Jared Goff had 3 carries, -2 yards. And Khalif Raymond had 1 carry, -12 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 7 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Sam Laporta had 2 receptions, 28 yards. David Montgomery had 3 receptions for 23 yards. Tim Patrick had 2 receptions for 12 yards. Khalif Raymond had 1 reception for 12 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 1 reception for 11 yards. We had Allen Robinson with 1 reception for 2 yards. And we also had Brock Wright with 1 reception for 1 yard. And for the Packers side of things, we had Jordan Love with 23 carries, 39 yards, 23 completions, 39 attempts. I'm sorry about my brain today. 273 yards and 8 interception. Josh Jacobs had 13 carries, 95 yards. Emmanuel Wilson had 4 carries, 28 yards, and a touchdown. We had Chris Brooks with 2 carries for 13 yards. And Tucker Kraft with 1 carry for 2 yards. Jordan Love had the ball 3 times but didn't get anything out of it. Then we had Jaden Reed, 5 receptions, 113 yards. We had Christian Watson with 3 receptions for 37 yards. Tucker Kraft with 4 receptions, 34 yards. Romeo Doubs with 4 receptions, 28 yards. Chris Brooks with 3 receptions, 28 yards. We have Bo Melton with 1 reception for 19 yards. Josh Jacobs had 2 receptions for 13 yards. And Emmanuel Wilson had 1 reception for 1 yard. Then we had the Colts and the Vikings, with the Vikings winning at 21-13. We had Joe Flacco complete 16 passes out of 27 attempts, 179 yards, and 8 interception. We had Jonathan Taylor with 13 carries, 48 yards. We had Ashton Dulin with 2 carries for 17 yards. We had Trey Sermon with 2 carries for 4 yards. And Joe Flacco had 2 carries for -1 yard. Josh Downs had 6 receptions for 60 yards. We had Alec Pierce with 3 receptions for 41 yards. We had Adonai Mitchell with 1 reception for 22 yards, as well as Kalen Granson. We had Michael Pittman Jr. with 1 reception, 14 yards. Jonathan Taylor had 3 receptions for 11 yards. And Trey Sermon had 1 reception for 9 yards. For the Vikings side of things, we had Sam Darnold complete 28 passes out of 34 attempts, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Justin Jefferson completed a pass out of one attempt for 22 yards. We had Aaron Jones, 21 carries, 64 yards. Cam Akers with 6 carries for 46 yards. Sam Darnold with 4 carries, 14 yards. And Jordan Addison with 1 carry for 9 yards. We had Justin Jefferson, 7 receptions, 137 yards. We had Josh Oliver with 5 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. Jordan Addison with 5 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson with 3 receptions, 27 yards. We had Aaron Jones with 4 receptions, 18 yards. Brandon Powell had 1 reception, 9 yards. Cam Akers had 2 receptions for 7 yards. We had Trent Sherfield Sr. with 1 reception, 7 yards. And last but not least, we had Jalen Nailor with 1 reception, 7 yards, and a touchdown. Last but not least, we have the Buccaneers and the Chiefs, with the Chiefs win at 30-24 in the third OT game of this week. And we had Baker Mayfield complete 23 passes out of 31 attempts, 200 yards exactly, and 2 touchdowns. We have Bucky Irving with 7 carries, 24 yards. Sterling Shepard had 2 carries, 21 yards. Baker Mayfield had 4 carries for 20 yards. Nice. We had Rachaad White with 3 carries, 19 yards, and a touchdown. And we had Sean Tucker with 3 carries for 11 yards. Cam Otton had 8 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. We had Sterling Shepard with 4 receptions, 48 yards. We had Trey Palmer with 2 receptions, 33 yards. We had Rachaad White with 3 receptions, 16 yards. Bucky Irving had 3 receptions, 10 yards. We had Raheem Jarrett with 1 reception, 9 yards. We had Sean Tucker with 1 reception, 6 yards. And we have Ryan Miller with 1 reception, 1 yard, and a touchdown. Chiefs side of things, we have Patrick Mahomes complete 34 passes out of 44 attempts, 291 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt had 27 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. Sam J. Perine had 1 carry for 10 yards. Carson Steele had 3 carries for 9 yards. Patrick Mahomes had 2 carries for 9 yards. And Xavier Worthy had 2 carries, -10 yards. Travis Kelce had 14 receptions, 100 yards exact. DeAndre Hopkins had 8 receptions, 86 yards, and 2 touchdowns, I should say. Justin Watson had 3 receptions, 43 yards. Sam J. Perine had 4 receptions, 25 yards, and a touchdown. Mecole Hardman had 3 receptions for 17 yards. Kareem Hunt had 1 reception for 11 yards. And Peyton Hendershot had 1 reception for 9 yards. And that is going to be it for this recap video. And tomorrow I'll have my prediction video out for week 10. And I just hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you guys enjoy the video tomorrow. And as always, I'll see you all in the next one. I'll see you around.